ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, y'all know I'm a retired judge, and when I speak, everybody listens, okay? We're going to start our program right now. Let me thank you all again for being here, and I want to bring our special guest up to the podium, but before we bring Congressman Robert Scott up, or as we affectionately know him, Bobby Scott, I just want to take a moment and thank my board. I have the most amazing board of directors at the Sentencing Project. And in fact, if I could just take a brief second so that you could see them, my board is comprised of Fred Epstein, a brilliant business consultant and financial expert. Bob Weiss, who has been with us since day one. I think he and Malcolm conceived this over a good glass of wine back some 25 years ago. Bob is a retired education administrator. Marsha Weissman, who is our representative from New York. She's the executive director for the Center for Community Alternatives, a real passionate warrior in the field. You know our own Oprah, Angela Davis, professor of law at American University, and Robert Crutchfield, who we call Crutch, is a professor of sociology at the University of Washington. In fact, he heads the department. Bob Crane, former president of the Jet Foundation, has just joined our board, and I am so honored to have him with us. We could not be joined today by Ronnie Coleman Davis, a former U.S. attorney, and I'm going to grow up and be like Ronnie, because Ronnie's on vacation, and Ronnie's always traveling someplace exotic and sexy. She just got home from Australia, and now she's gone someplace else. Randy Stone is a professor of law at the University of Chicago, and Bob Kramer, who is a political consultant. This is the board that guides the Sentencing Project, and I'm really blessed to have them because it's a diverse collection of minds, but all committed to justice. So that's why we are who we are. Now I want to bring Mark Maurer up because I was not joking. We are blessed to have Congressman Robert Scott with us, who has, he has been joined with us at the hip since I joined the board way back in the early 90s. He has been a loyal supporter of everything that we do. But I want Mark to make a more formal introduction of Bobby Scott, and then I want you to hear from him and be uplifted.
Congressman Scott, if you can indulge me, just take a moment. I just want to recognize first our staff. Can our staff come up front here, staff of the Sentencing Project? These are the people who make me look good every day. I want to introduce everybody. Let's give them a big round of applause. Starting on my right here, Nicole Porter is our state advocacy coordinator, Mark Levin, our director of development, Sarah Wheat McConan, our database manager, Katie Zaft, an intern from the University of Maryland, Karen DeWitt, our communications manager, Ashley Nellis, our research analyst, Cody Mason, our program associate, Ben Bronstein, an intern, Terry Nixon, who put this all together today. Thank you, Terry. Kara Gotch, our director of advocacy. Let me say, I may be a little biased, but I do believe we have the most dedicated, hardworking, and fun staff of any organization you will find, and they make my job look very easy every day. So thank you so much. We also have a couple of our former staff who helped to make us the organization we are today. I hope you're still here. Ryan King and Angela Boone. Ryan is now with the Pew Trust, Angela with DC Bar Association. Thank you for all your hard work over many years. Our work would not be possible without the support of many individuals and institutional funders. Let me just mention two in particular who have been with us, almost from day one. From the Open Society Foundations, Lenny Noisette and William Johnston, and many of their colleagues over many years have really provided the backbone for our support and made everything possible that we've done. And thank them so much. From the Public Welfare Foundation, Mary McClyman, and many of her colleagues, and the same thing there too. The generosity they've given us, the flexibility and the engagement when the issues has really been terrific. On the side here, our good friend Dennis Sobin. You've heard the music in the background here. Dennis Sobin of the Safe Streets Arts Foundation, bringing the arts in prison to the outside world and doing it in just such a terrific way. We have 3 speakers on our short program today, but it's my great honor to introduce one of our heroes in public policy, and that's Congressman Bobby Scott. Many of you in the room know Congressman Scott, and I think that's a tribute to his engagement with people in the field of criminal justice and juvenile justice reform. Among the many issues he's taken leadership on were last year's successful adoption of the Fair Sentencing Act, narrowing disparity in crack cocaine sentencing, his longtime leadership on the Youth Promise Act, and other measures to treat kids the way they should be treated. Congressman Scott has many accomplishments, but I do feel obligated to let you know that in some respects, he's actually not as politically sophisticated as you might believe. And I'm just going to point out 2 of his, I'm going to call them flaws in particular. One of them is that Congressman Scott actually believes that research should guide public policy. It's an old-fashioned belief. It was very popular in parts of the 16th and 17th century. I've tried to talk him out of it many times, but he clings to the idea that research should guide public policy. His other key flaws, I would describe it, is that he actually believes that public policy should respect the Constitution also. I mean, talk about outdated ideas about public policy. Now, there are other people you'll find on the Hill who claim to care about the Constitution, but the way you can tell how Congressman Scott is distinct from that is that whenever you see a vote in the House of something like 433-2, there's an excellent chance that Congressman Scott is one of the 2. I don't know whether or not this helps his political career, but there are at least some of us in the room who appreciate it. So please join me in welcoming Bobby Scott.
Thank you, Mark. You know, some people are just eternal optimists, and one day I think the research and the Constitution will actually be politically popular. They isn't here yet, but thank you so much. And Malcolm Young, thank you for your vision and bringing the sentencing project to fruition. And Mark, over most of the 25 years, I've been in Congress for 19 of those years. And we have relied, when they talk about research being meaningful, everybody knows where we get that research from, because we couldn't make criminal justice policy having anything to do with research without Mark Maurer. So, Mark, thank you for all that you do. I mean, if you look at all the numbers, the Pew Research Center has done research and found that any incarceration rate above 350 per 100,000, you start getting diminishing returns. Over 500 per 100,000 is actually counterproductive. And we wouldn't know where we were but for Mark and his research and state by state. And we found that the incarceration rate now is over 700 per 100,000. African Americans, on average, 2,200 per 100,000. 10 states, because of the information we've gotten from Mark, we know lock up African Americans at the rate of 4,000 per 100,000. And that's not only counterproductive, but also wastes a lot of money, because we have choices to make in public policy. Are we going to invest in young people before they get in trouble with the continuum of services, getting them on the right track and keeping them on the right track, or are we going to wait for them to drop out of school, join a gang, mess up, get caught, and then get into a bidding war as to how much time they're going to serve? And that bidding war, with all the slogans and sound bites that you're familiar with, got us to the point where in some states as many as 4,000 per 100,000 are locked up today. And if you think of the alternative, what kind of money we would have available if we just took the counterproductive part in those 10 states and invested it in 1/3 of the children in that locality that are at risk of messing up. And just do the back-of-the-envelope arithmetic. The number is $10,000 per child every year that somehow they've decided to invest in prisons rather than a comprehensive program to get young people on the right track and keep them on the right track. $10,000 per child per year. And the interesting thing about that is that really nobody ever makes the choice. Nobody's making the decision. Mark gives us the information so we have a clue of what's going on, but the legislature codifies the soundbite, calls a press conference about how tough they are on crime. Then the prosecutor calls a press conference when they've arrested somebody who is guilty of that, who is found to have violated that soundbite. And then he presents the information to the judge. Judge, stuck with the mandatory minimums, has no choice. And we have a situation that we had in one of the cities in my district where they had a little roundup. Two of the guys, ringleaders, one of them got 50 years, another one got 35 years. Now, you know that the ringleaders in a gang, drug dealing, their territory is going to be absorbed by the afternoon. By the time they're locked up, their territory is going to be pretty much assumed. So you've really done very little about crime, but you've spent, on the first one, multiply 30,000 times 50, you get $1.5 million. The other one over $1 million, $2.5 million that somehow the system has gotten us to spend on these two people in a city that's cutting funding for Boys and Girls Clubs. Now, how did that decision get made? Well, it's bad enough that we're making it, but we wouldn't even begin to know how to unravel that without the information that we get from Mark Maurer. So we're making those choices every day in Congress, and actually we're making a little progress. Last year, with Mark's help and many others in this room, we were able to reduce, not eliminate, but reduce the crack powder cocaine disparity from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, and incredibly, by increasing the amount of crack needed, not lowering the amount of powder, which was another suggestion. If it's stupid for crack, let it be stupid for powder, too. The mandatory minimum is still there. We wanted to eliminate all the mandatory minimums so the judges could impose a sentence that made sense. But at least the threshold now is out of the $300 or $400 worth of crack that somebody could have for a weekend's worth of recreational use, and into 10,000 or so where you're actually dealing. We did make that jump. That was the first, as I understand it, Mark, the first mandatory minimum that has actually been repealed in 30 or 40 years. And so we're making a little progress. A few years ago, they passed the prison building money. If you abolish parole, you get some prison building money. And I went after that, eliminate half of it, to try to put it into Boys and Girls Clubs and after-school programs, prevention programs. First year I did that, I didn't get a majority of the Democratic caucus, much less anywhere close to half of the House. The next year, I got about 125 votes. The year after that, about 150 votes. The year after that, about 180 votes. And we were ready to do a lobbying effort to really knock it out altogether when we looked up and somebody had beat us to the punch and taken it out in committee, so it wasn't even there for us to kill on the floor. But we were making progress, convincing people that the money for prison building could be better spent in investing in our young people. But we have a long way to go. We just saw Troy Davis in that spectacle where 9 witnesses testified against him at trial. 7 recanted their testimony, including one who's on television saying that the police coerced him into lying on the stand. One of the other 2, I think it's fair to say that from her vantage point, could not have made a credible identification. And the last one is an actual suspect of having done it himself. With that evidence there, the judge was faced with the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which on appeal requires a person to prove innocence by clear and convincing evidence. Actually, the judge used a better standard than that, but under the law, prove innocence by clear and convincing evidence. And it's interesting, under that standard that's in law today, if you can show there's no evidence against you, all of the evidence has been disparaged, lack of evidence of guilt is not affirmative evidence of innocence. So you haven't proved your innocence. And there you are, like Troy Davis, with at least by any objective standard, reasonable doubt, being put to death. The only thing that I find disappointing in that is that the entire structure, prison guards and everybody else, went along and did their duty to put him to death. I'd have thought somewhere along the line, someone would have had a conscience and said, no, I just can't do it. Everybody knows there's reasonable doubt I'm just not going to participate, find somebody else. Apparently, there was nobody like that. But you have right now, because people want an effective death penalty, a situation where I guess clogging up the courts with all these innocent people would undermine the effectiveness of our death penalty, and people like Troy Davis are the victims of that policy. But there is one bright light. Mark mentioned the Youth Promise Act. We are making progress on that. Last year, we had a majority of the House as sponsors on the Youth Promise Act. The Senate was making a different choice, and so we couldn't get it passed. But the Youth Promise Act requires a community to come together, everybody that has anything to do with young people getting in trouble, get around the table. That's law enforcement, school system, mental health, faith-based community, business community, everybody that has anything to do with young people in trouble, get around the table and first determine how much money you're spending on counterproductive incarceration. A lot of small communities of 100,000 will find, a lot of them will find they're spending $100 million when you include incarceration, and certainly easily $100 million if you include teen pregnancy-related welfare and Medicaid. Because you know if you have an effective prevention program, you're going to reduce not only incarceration expenses, but also teen pregnancy. Find out what you're spending and then come up with a comprehensive evidence-based plan. We put evidence-based in the bill. You know, evidence-based as opposed to what? As opposed to the slogans and sound bites that codify, if you didn't put evidence-based in there, to come up with a plan, and then the federal government will fund it. One of the things we insist on is as you save the money that everybody knows you're going to save, the people around the table should be committed to chip in some of what they save. Now, you can't get them to do it beforehand because everybody's budget is tight, but as you save the money, kick back in. In areas like they had a comprehensive little program in Richmond, Virginia, in my district, where they reduced the number of murders from 19 to 2. And if you look at the ratio of gunshot wounds to murders and know what the Medical College of Virginia hospital, emergency room, trauma unit, and hospital didn't have to incur as uncompensated care, you probably saved the $2.5 million right in the hospital, to say nothing about what you saved in police chasing after people, judges and court services having to convict them, and then the Department of Corrections having to house them. If it's a gunshot wound, you know they're going to be there a long time. You know you're going to save money and have people kick back in. You know you're going to save more money than you spend. Pennsylvania funded about 100 programs with $60 million. We went back and looked, and they'd saved about $300 million, spent $60 million, saved $300 million. So we figure if you can get them to kick back anywhere close to a third of what they actually save, we can more than keep the programs going. But the Youth Promise Act has been introduced again this year. Call your members to tell them to co-sponsor the Youth Promise Act. And I think it is an example, a bright light of an opportunity we have to use the information that Mark has given us, to use the research that's available to effectively reduce crime and get away from the slogans and sound bites. So Mark, you have made it possible for us because you've given us that information. I guess it's up to us to use the information like we have some sense. Thank you very much.
we only had 434 like him, we'd be in good shape, I think. One quick thing, another one of our former staffers was hiding in the back. I didn't know he's still here, but Ted Ashby, for all your years of service to the Sentencing Project, thank you so much as well. So, appreciate that. But of course, Bobby Vassar, it goes without saying in this room, has been, if there's a friend on Capitol Hill, it's Bobby Vassar, a stalwart for us all these years. Thank you so much. Please, yes, thank you so much for being here, all the work that you do. Where's Susan? Susan Phillips is our soon-to-be new research analyst at the Sentencing Project, too. She comes from us from the University of Illinois. She'll be joining us in December, and you may have seen her taking photos. We don't pay her to take photos, but we appreciate it nonetheless. Thank you so much, Susan. Okay. To introduce our next speaker, let me call on Marcia Weissman, the Vice President of the Board of the Sentencing Project. Marcia?
Hi, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Malcolm Young, who is the founder of the Sentencing Project. I think we've heard a lot about evidence-based today, and I want to sort of start by saying Malcolm was not evidence-based. He started this work before there was evidence, but he knew that the Sentencing Project would make a difference because of his long and tireless years as an advocate for justice, working as a defense attorney in the trenches. And I think what we see after the fact, that sometimes it takes someone to take a bold step without a hell of a lot of evidence to let the rest of us then accumulate the data. I first met Malcolm at the beginning of my career as a sentencing advocate, and Malcolm helped hold together what is now, I won't say flourishing, but fairly prevalent profession across the country of people who go into courts every day to make the case about why someone should not be incarcerated and what are alternatives. Under his leadership, Malcolm went from creating a network of national sentencing advocates to creating a policy and advocacy organization that really set the groundwork and the pathway for incredible work on racial justice, reduction of sentence length, and smart sentencing reforms. Since leaving the Sentencing Project in Mark's good hands, I might add, he has continued his work as an advocate for justice, working with the John Howard Association in Chicago. In 2010, he was awarded a Soros Justice Fellowship, and he's an adjunct professor at Northwestern University School of Law. So with our deepest thanks, I want to turn it over to Malcolm Young.
Well, I got to tell you, I got an email from Mark some months ago, and he said, we're having this celebration, and will you come? And I said, yeah, well, that's great. And I agreed to do that, of course. And then a little bit later, he got an invitation from him, or a notice, and said, would you speak for a few minutes? I think he said 3. It's not going to be 3. On why I established the Sentencing Project and what vision I had at the time. And so I rolled into that and said, that's fine. But I got to tell you, to have been with you in the room today, to listen to the speakers, to listen to Jeremy Travis looking ahead 25 years, to see this group, to look out and see the people who have supported the Sentencing Project back from the start, kept us alive, kept us going, and then to have seen what it has become under Mark's leadership with this new staff is an almost overwhelming experience, and I hope it won't cause, it'll be a good excuse if my tongue gets tied, let me put it that way.
It's warming. But one should remember, and I do, that an organization that you leave when your time comes to leave is not yours anymore. It becomes what the new leadership and the new staff make it, and what they build out of it. And that's where the credit goes, where it has come and what it has done in the last 6 years is almost was beyond what we imagined when we began. And it's rewarding and emotional to me to be here and to have seen this event today. And I want to thank you for the invitation. Not many people have asked me why or what was going on, why I established the Sentencing Project. And here on the 25th anniversary, it's a good time for me to take a couple of minutes or more to answer that question. But it goes back, the answer goes back more than 25 years. It goes back actually to the 35 years. Just a few weeks ago in Chicago, a group of us had a reunion, the 35th reunion of the Criminal Defense Consortium of Cook County. Randy Stone, who I think is here, was there. We were two of the attorneys in one of the early Chicago area neighborhood criminal defense organizations that were specially funded, worked with indigent clients, had the use of social workers, bilingual investigators, clinical resources, and all the experts that you need to put on a good defense in criminal cases. We won a lot of the cases that we presented, and we got good plea arrangements in others, and we succeeded for our clients, and we did so because of the resources, because of the social workers and the law students, and because we learned what our clients' lives were made of, what their problems were. And we were able to present their lives and their issues to sentencing courts and to prosecutors and to do better for them as a result. We put our clients into programs. We got social workers to present their stories to judges, and we kept many of them on probation. It made a difference. Our work and the resources we had made a difference to them. It made a difference to, in some instances, victims. It made a difference for the better to the community, and it made a difference to us, the people who worked for them. Stephen Bright, a hero of mine, and I'm sure of many people in this room, has talked about what it means to be a criminal defense attorney in a death penalty case. It said that the permission that a person in the most extreme situation you can imagine gives you to enter their life, enter their soul, and to understand the deepest secrets that they have in order to try to save their life is a terrific honor, a great honor, and something that changes the person who provides the work. We who worked in Chicago in non-capital cases had a much less intense experience, but we were still allowed into the hearts and the souls and the minds of our clients, and we learned something from this. We learned that much that was done that was criminal acts, could be explained, it could be understood, if not forgiven, and sometimes it could be forgiven. And we learned, therefore, the failings of the people we worked with and the failings of the system to address and solve the problems. We learned that the answers were not, in most cases, in prison. And we had to suffer the pain of standing next to people we no longer believed should go to prison, and sometimes unsuccessfully try to keep them out. And that was the experience that Marcia referred to, the experience of the criminal defense attorneys in the trenches who have the resources to do the kind of work you'd like to do. In 1980, I left Chicago and I came to Washington and worked for the National Legal Aid and Defender Association on a federally funded grant to set up appellate defender offices in 3 states in the country. And we succeeded, and that project was coming to an end when Herb Holter, who worked with Jerry Miller at the National Center on Institutions and Alternatives, brought to us a proposal to apply to the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation for joint funding to set up offices with programs with public defenders in various parts of the country to show that with the assistance of people trained by NCIA, social workers and writers and people who would be willing to look at people who had problems and were in criminal court, and to present their case, their situation to the judge, that we would get better results, that public defenders would get better results for their clients. And we started to do that at the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, and then continued for 2 years at the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, and then went on our own and started the Sentencing Project in 1984. One of the locations that we went to was Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a young social scientist-oriented student there working with the American Friends Service Committee to help the public defender in Ann Arbor send fewer people to prison was Mark Maurer. When the time came to open an independent office in Washington, Mark was the first full-time hire that we made. And all told, we continued the work, and all told, in this phase of the Sentencing Project's work, I think we went into about 30 states, and we helped set up more than 30 programs in about 22 different states. Some of the programs we set up were statewide, and some of the programs that we set up were local. But these were programs that were meant to reduce the number of people going to prison by showing what the individual characteristics, the mitigating factors, the humanity, to borrow Jeremy Travis's words of today, were. And that's what the Sentencing Project was doing for a good first part of its life. That was phase one. Phase two began when the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation announced that it wanted to give us and other grantees $10,000 mini grants to get into public education and media work. So of course, that was a lot of money back then. We took it, and we did use that money to help promote alternative sentencing programs in, I remember, New Mexico and some other places. So we had some success with that. And then jump ahead to early 1989, and I'm in the office, and Mark came into it and told me that he'd been looking at some numbers. And he thought, it looked like by the end of the year, going into 1990, we were going to have 1 million people in jail and prisons, and nobody was talking about this. So he thought we could take some of the media money from the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation and do a report or a press release and announce this and get some attention to this issue. So we did, and he did that. We had a press release at a meeting. It was a one-page report, one-page press release, all the same thing. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and all the major media outlets picked up on this. It ran across the country. We got a lot of attention for it. The Department of Justice, not the Department of Justice of today, denied the truth that America had 1 million people behind bars for about 3 days. Then they consulted their statisticians, and they went quiet on the issue. We took, so that was a great success. It was a lot of fun, and we decided we wanted to do more. I went to New York and other places to some foundations and asked for more money to do some of this media work, and was told once in 2 days in 2 different foundations by program officers that the Sentencing Project didn't have the staff with the technical training and the resources to do this kind of work, do this kind of research, and we didn't get the money. A few weeks or months later, I'm in my office again, and Mark comes down the hall. I remember this to this day. It might not be accurate, but I remember it. And he said, I've been looking at numbers out of California, and someone's done some work there, and it shows that really a high number of African American and a minority and ethnic minority individuals are in the criminal justice system, particularly people of a younger age. And I've been looking at some other things, and I think maybe we can make a case about the numbers nationally in the United States as a whole. We didn't have any money for it. We didn't have a charter for it. We decided to go ahead and do it. And Mark did that work. When the Sentencing Project issued Young Black Men in the Criminal Justice System, a Growing National Problem, in February of 1990, our office had 3 old-fashioned phone lines. Each phone had a light that went on when the line was in use. For 3 weeks after that report came out, if you wanted to call out, you had to sit and watch the phone to see if a light would go out and then grab it before it went on again to make your call. Otherwise, we couldn't get that call out. And I'm sorry, I know we missed a lot of calls, including probably the 2 from the program officers in New York calling to apologize for having, but I'm sure they made it. I didn't get it. Well, it was a report that the media and scholars and practitioners wouldn't leave alone, and it was the beginning, it was the start. Again, the Department of Justice denied the numbers and denied the racial impact of the criminal justice system, again, for about 3 days. Wasn't today's Justice Department. And then they went to their researchers and, again, went silent. Well, that report, I think, launched the second phase of the organization's work of informing the realities of the public and policymakers of the realities of the criminal justice system and of corrections practice and of research. An organization that published one clear and direct report after another documenting racial disparity, the impact of the war on drugs, the consequences of harsh sentencing policies, the collateral impact of criminal convictions, including the loss of voting rights. So many topics, so many reports of uncompromising accuracy, read by so many, reported so widely, relied upon by policymakers and people who make a difference everywhere. We had, as we once said in one of our grant applications, and once promised, help to change the way Americans thought about crime and punishment. We'd gone well beyond what I had thought about when we started the Sentencing Project. We had exceeded many times over the vision I had for the Sentencing Project. And the work that the Sentencing Project continues to do today under Mark's leadership and with a talented and dedicated staff fulfills the original vision I had many times over to this day, and it will for the next 25 years. Of that we can be confident. Everyone in this room wants good and just policies informed by research, tempered by experience. What we have is a lot of bad policy driven by politics, to which a firm, consistent, principled reporting that resonates with the truth is the best possible response. The Sentencing Project today provides that response. It takes the initiative and it moves ahead of the curve, and I can't tell you how warm and wonderful it makes me feel to have been any part of it in any time in its first 19 years. So my thanks are not just for the question, Mark, but to you, Mark, my thanks, and to the board and the staff of the Sentencing Project for fulfilling, and then some, a vision, for brilliantly carrying a struggle to keep more people who never needed to be in prison and don't need to be in prison out of our jails and out of our prisons, and to move us toward a world that Jeremy Travis tried to describe for us, one that solves problems and not attacks individuals who are victimized on either side by those problems. So I want to thank you again for the invitation, for your support, and for the wonderful work that the Sentencing Project has done. It makes my life easier. Everywhere I go, if somebody finds out I have anything to do with the Sentencing Project, it's almost a free beer. Thank you.
Just so you know, I knew when I told Malcolm 3 minutes, it wasn't going to be 3 minutes, but it's okay. It's okay. And I think as the Sentencing Project has evolved over the years, I like to think that the one thing that we stay true to is that original vision, that we care about the individuals going through the system, and the reason we try to change policy, the reason we engage in research and advocacy is to try to keep uppermost in our minds what it means for individuals on all sides of this issue. Let me introduce our final speaker, good friend and colleague from today's Justice Department, Laurie Robinson, the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs. This is Laurie's second go-round at OJP. As most of you know, she was heading Office of Justice Programs in the 1990s. Unfortunately for Laurie, she did such a good job that by popular demand, the demand of the Attorney General, she was brought back to do it again, and we're all better off for that being the case. Laurie's career includes having directed the Criminal Justice Program for the American Bar Association, the Master's Degree Program in Criminology at the University of Pennsylvania. And if I would characterize her contributions at the Justice Department, it seems to me that she has helped the field of criminal justice, broadly speaking, in advancing scientific knowledge to the field, in engaging with practitioners, in bringing the practitioners together with the scholars, to further our understanding of what are very complex issues and require complex solutions. And she has never shied away from addressing the complexity of those issues, but by her leadership in all sorts of areas, I think has helped to really raise the level of sophistication and creativity of the field, and I think we have all benefited greatly from that. So we are so appreciative of your leadership, and please welcome Laurie Robinson.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I'm really delighted and honored to have been asked to speak here and in the company of so many longtime friends and colleagues, and certainly with the distinguished fellow speakers. Malcolm, it's great to see you here, and Congressman Bobby Scott, and to get their perspectives and certainly their leadership on this issue. Malcolm, it's really hard for me to actually believe it's been 25 years since you started the organization. I actually remember that very well when a small group of determined folks started the organization back then, kind of a visionary idea to match our sentencing policies with the highest ideals of our justice system. I think the years passed by very, very quickly, and so much in this area has changed for the better. Obviously, a lot of work still to be done, but so much has changed thanks to the work of the Sentencing Project. In thinking about coming over here, I paused and considered, some of the things and the progress that has been made. For example, the fact that this past year, our Bureau of Justice Statistics, and this is a new Justice Department, I'm glad that you recognize that, our Bureau of Justice Statistics reported the first decline in overall state prison populations since 1977. The fact that just this August, and you probably talked about this today, that the Sentencing Project itself reported that this year some 13 states have either closed correctional institutions or are seriously considering doing so. The fact of what's going on in California right now as a result of the Supreme Court's action in the last term, and the kind of dramatic effects that that is certain to have. The fact that our National Institute of Justice has just awarded a grant to the National Research Council that's going to be looking ahead at what the national academies there can study in terms of causes and consequences of high rates of incarceration, what the costs and benefits are, to look ahead. And I think under the leadership of National Institute of Justice, John Laub, I think that kind of careful look through research is something that's long overdue. And from the vantage point of the Justice Department right now, under Eric Holder's leadership, he is certainly somebody who cares so much about these issues. He was a leading voice, as I think you know, in ending the crack-to-powder federal sentencing disparity that Bobby Scott talked about. He understood that it just made no sense at all, not only in assuring that we're not overburdening the federal prison system, but much more fundamentally in addressing the notion of equal treatment under law. The Attorney General has also been a champion of effective prisoner reentry programs, both on the state and local and also on the federal level. Just 2 weeks ago, he convened the second meeting of something I think is very important, the Federal Interagency Reentry Council, which is a cabinet-level group, something that's very exciting. Marlene Beckman, who's here from my staff, has been staffing that along with Amy Solomon. And I think I'm not overstating it to say that this is a rather remarkable and groundbreaking pulling together of about half of the cabinet members getting together in an interagency gathering to see what can be done to break through the normal kind of interdepartmental barriers to assist in helping formerly incarcerated individuals. As an example, they have pulled together fact sheets that we call Mythbusters that clarify federal policies to help those who are coming back into the community, to clarify things like Medicaid eligibility and public housing eligibility, areas like employment. And this Reentry Council is already making important changes to federal administrative policies that are going to have a huge impact on the reentry population. Just to give you one example, the Veterans Administration has changed a long-standing policy that now allows them to begin working with incarcerated veterans at day one, rather than waiting until 6 months before they're about to get out. I think that's a very significant change. And that's the kind of revisions that this Reentry Council under Attorney General Holder is trying to push to positively impact not just the safety, but public health of communities around the country. Now, we know these are incremental changes, but it's all of those kind of pushes, step by step, that I think are going to be needed. And there are other areas that I can mention. I know I'm probably going over my 3 minutes, but I want to just mention a few of them, like the bipartisan work on justice reinvestment. I suspect you touched on that during your day today. Our Bureau of Justice Assistance, working with the Council of State Governments in Pew, working in states all across this country, and now we're touching on that in the federal system as well. That's really changing the landscape of our corrections system nationwide, and it's bipartisan work, very important. Also, and we've touched on this evening, the spread of evidence-based thinking and practices in our field. What an idea, relying on science. Very important, but something we really need to celebrate, and thinking about the next 25 years, something on which we're going to need to continue to rely. As we think about moving ahead, we need to applaud the kind of optimism and the kind of determined energy that Malcolm and Mark have really brought to this great organization. That kind of energy, even with a small group of people, has really generated tremendous positive momentum. And I think we need to keep building on that, bearing in mind, and I know a judge early on, and I can't remember his name, but he used to say about judicial reform that it's not a sport for the short-winded. And the same is true here. Not a sport for the short-winded. This is going to take continued perseverance and a will to resist falling back on convention and tradition. But if we think about it, the Sentencing Project has always been willing to buck convention. You fought back against those folks in the Justice Department who said, well, that can't be true, until they consulted their researchers. And then what did you say? They fell silent. I like that. And so you're going to keep pushing on, and I'm confident that your role in helping guide the quest for justice is going to remain not only relevant, but vital. You're going to keep pushing ahead. You've been pioneers. You're going to keep going. So let's pretend we all have a glass of champagne here. Let's say congratulations on 25 successful years, and here's to 25 more. Hear, hear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just for the record, I think it's clear we much prefer dialogue with the Justice Department to fighting with the Justice Department, and we always try to do that whenever we can. This brings us to the close of what I think has been a very stimulating and provocative day, and I hope you all feel the same way. As I said at the beginning, this is just the beginning, we hope, of the next 25 years, not just for the sentencing project, but for all of us who care about public safety and better ways of structuring how we try to achieve these things. My thanks again to the staff, the board of the Sentencing Project, and all of our colleagues here in the room. This has not been a celebration just for the Sentencing Project, but I think a reflection that we all have made progress in the last 25 years, and we should feel proud of that, and we should feel optimistic about that. This is not going to be easy. It never was, but I think we know something about how to do things a little bit better than we did before, and that's what we're going to keep doing. So we are going to see you again in 25 years, if not before, and thank you so much for coming out tonight.